Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for this fabulous panel discussion on social innovation as it relates to city building. I'm Petra Basili from the Vancouver Economic Commission, and we're really excited to be doing this as part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Global Disruptive Innovation Festival, which is a 3-week-long curated online festival that brings together businesses, entrepreneurs, academics, makers, and learners, really to help share ideas and share innovation with respect to taking us into the economy of the future. It's important to us as the Vancouver Economic Commission to be part of this global discussion on disruptive innovation because we see ourselves as kind of disruptive innovators in the world of economic development. We recognize that traditional economic development is not really sufficient to serve our cities and communities' needs. And so we're really pioneering a new form of economic development that focuses on building entire business ecosystems as opposed to just individual businesses. That focuses not just on job numbers, but on the quality of those jobs by focusing on innovative, creative, and sustainable business sectors. And that's measured on a wider set of metrics than GDP and job numbers. As part of this work, we're excited to be launching an innovation center in a 100,000 square foot former Vancouver police station dedicated to supporting social innovation, technology, and a variety of business incubators and accelerators that might otherwise be operating in isolation. We're delighted to be supporting and amplifying the message of Vancouver businesses and sharing our leading work on green economic development at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Paris in December. And we're thrilled to be launching a number of local initiatives to support the shift to a circular economy, smarter logistics systems, and 100% renewable energy by 2050. From Greenpeace to the 100-Mile Diet and the Occupy movement, Vancouver has long been a source of disruptive social innovation on a global scale. This is particularly true in the realm of city building, where many of our innovations have gone on to become known as Vancouverisms worldwide. This includes things like the continuous public waterfront and the podium tower development that have been emulated now in many cities around the world. In advance of our conversation today, Simon Fraser University and HCMA Architecture and Design brought together over 100 local disruptors to temporarily transform spaces in Vancouver's public realm, an activity that I hope will become yet another long-standing Vancouver tradition and model for engaging citizens in city building worldwide. This urban activation project, under the title of Tilt City, brought together teams to explore, design, and create interventions in the urban fabric that encourage citizens to pause, take note of their surroundings, and interact. Social innovation in city building is in Vancouver's DNA. It manifests itself in the way our academic institutions are convening globally disruptive conversations about the role of cities in tackling climate change. It's evident in the way our architecture and design firms are leveraging built-form solutions to shine a light on social issues and economic inequality. And it's evident in the way Vancouver's booming tech sector is developing tools for public participation in city building. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel for this afternoon. Our moderator is Ismael Santos. Ismael is a serial social entrepreneur who has co-founded 3 successful nonprofit social enterprises, including the Hive Vancouver Society, Open Green Building Society, and the Vancouver Design Nerds. Ismael earns a living as a green building expert and principal of Recollective Consulting, a multidisciplinary green building consulting firm that he co-founded in 2006. Next to him, we have Colleen Hardwick. Colleen is the founder and president of PlaceSpeak, the first location-based online community consultation platform. PlaceSpeak already has over 13,000 civically minded individuals engaging with hundreds of organizations online, and they're revolutionizing public consultation and community engagement by empowering citizens to influence decision-making processes in an open, secure, and transparent manner. Colleen is an urban geographer, film producer, and internet entrepreneur. Next to Colleen, we have Andrew Petter, who is the Vice President and Vice Chancellor of Simon Fraser University. Prior to joining SFU in 2010, he was professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Victoria, where he served as dean from 2001 to 2008. Since becoming university president, Professor Petter has overseen the development and implementation of a strategic vision that seeks to distinguish SFU as Canada's most engaged university, defined by its dynamic integration of innovative education, cutting-edge research, and far-reaching community engagement. And finally, at the end, we have Daryl Condon. Daryl is the managing principal at HCMA Architecture and Design. He's developed a breadth of expertise in creating successful public spaces, including community centers, pools, recreation facilities, fire halls, and libraries across Canada. After 25 years of practice creating these dynamic, engaging, effective spaces, Daryl is asking, what's next? And focusing on creating spaces that leave lasting legacies in our community. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to Ismail.
Is this mic, do I have to use this mic as well? Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Petra, thanks for that, the intro, and thanks for inviting me. This is one of my favorite topics on social innovation, so I'm honored to be here, and I'm excited to hear what this panel has to say. We have a pretty tight agenda, so I've already briefed the panel, but I'm going to be asking them to answer the questions in about 2 minutes or less. And Petra is going to be standing over there, is going to help you, and in about 1.5 minutes, she's going to give you the wrap-up. So you have 30 seconds left to wrap up, and if you don't wrap up in time, I'm going to do the cane or that thing to stop you. So thank you. So the format will be about 30 minutes of panel discussion, followed by about 20 minutes of Q&A, and then a wrap-up. And so I will start with a few questions. First one, this is for all of you. Tell us a bit about what social innovation means to you and how you cultivate social innovation within your organizations. Colleen, let's start with you.
Well, in the case of what we've been doing with PlaySpeak, the idea is social innovation is making it real online, connecting people's digital identity to place, to encourage people to be communicating with decision makers, with policy makers in a real and reportable way. Instead of having anonymous and non-place-based discussions, being able to authenticate and make it real. So I think that would be the simplest way of explaining the innovation.
Excellent, and that was under 2 minutes, thank you. Andrew, you're up next.
Well, I think in the context of the university, where I guess I'm situated, the idea of social innovation is taking the university, its academic programs, its research, its physical infrastructure, and repositioning it. Instead of looking inward, looking outward, and seeing how can we leverage all that in a way that will transform society positively, in the belief that by doing that, we'll actually improve the educational experience for our students, we'll improve the motivation and the meaning of research, and we'll make the university a better place, not only for the community, but for the university itself. Thank you, Andrew.
Over to you, Daryl.
Well, and from my perspective as an architect and with managing a firm, for us it's about transforming our firm. We've looked at where we can have our greatest impact and looking to the future and saying, looking out over the horizon in 20 years, what does society need from us as architects? And we're trying to anticipate that, and we're trying to adapt and adjust and push the profession in a way to have greater social impact. So we're doing that with our firm, we're doing it internally, and events like today, we're sharing it externally as well. And we think that we can have impact that goes beyond simply the physical things that we do. It can also be affected by the processes and the things that we do and the way that we do things.
Because you've answered the question so quickly, I'm going to give you a tiny bit more time. Can you give us one more example besides the Tilt event?
Well, another example is we have an artist in residence program. And we did our first installation was last year. It was an installation called Faraday Cafe, which was up for 2 weeks in a space in Chinatown. And this was a space that it was a Faraday cage built as a cafe. And so what it did is when you went inside the Faraday cage, your cell phone signals were blocked. And really what it did was ask people to reevaluate or question or think about their relationship with technology. And so for us, this was an example of what we're trying to do as a firm, and that's being a catalyst. So we created this small little installation, and within that 2-week span, we had media from literally around the world on the doorstep of the cafe talking about and creating a conversation. And so it's just an example of how we can use these types of things and the catalytic effect to have much more impact than any one of us can have on our own.
That's awesome. Do you have any job openings? Okay. Next question. Social entrepreneurship is extremely important in tackling affordability, environmental justice, food system sustainability, pretty much everything. How do we foster, I'm gonna wait till the clapping goes on. How do we foster social entrepreneurship among young people and encourage social innovation in business? Daryl, I want to start with you because of your practice. If you can, 2 minutes or less.
Yeah, I guess I have a bit of a problem with the question because I think that the younger generation are way ahead of my generation in terms of social innovation and thinking. So for me to suggest to the younger generation how to innovate socially, I think is completely backwards. We need to be paying more attention to what is intrinsic in that generation. I actually have great hope because of the values that I see, and I see it in the people that come into our firm. They really want to make a contribution that goes beyond the task. So I think it's really how do we transform my generation and those generations older than I am. I think that's where we need to focus our energy.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer. Andrew?
Well, I'll pick up on that. I think the orientation and the motivation of young people is right there. They want to find ways to make a difference. Our job is to give them the tools and the opportunity, to give them programs where they're not just stuck in a classroom talking about ideas, but actually out there trying to make a difference, learning from that experience, then bringing it back into the classroom, thinking it through and going back into the community. Or in the case of entrepreneurship, giving them the opportunity to actually start up businesses or to interact with business and see how those ideas can work and how they can fail, because failure is part of the process, and to give them the reassurance that failure is okay. Hopefully it'll lead to success in the longer term, but it's part of the process. So I think it is providing the tools and the opportunity for young people who are already very motivated to want to be social entrepreneurs and citizens of the community.
Awesome, thank you.
So I would differentiate between being an entrepreneur for profit and being a social entrepreneur as, in both cases, you're trying to make money. You've got to be able to support yourself and survive, but it's the purpose behind what you're doing, and you're trying to do well by doing good. And I think that mindset is pervasive in the younger generation, and I'll just wait till the clapping ends. Creating opportunities for that are truly entrepreneurial. So you're not just trying to get more grants. It's not just about being nonprofits. You're actually going out and trying to create wealth in the system, but I would characterize it as doing well by doing good. And I think that's a theme that resonates well with young people and hopefully with everybody.
If I just pick up on a couple of those points that I completely agree with, that the notion of for-purpose companies, and I think that's certainly a phrase that we use, and we're not afraid of.
Did you say for purpose or
for
for
purpose?
profit?
For purpose.
Okay.
We understand that if we don't make a profit, we can't have much impact. But if we dedicate ourselves to a purpose, the profit will come, and so we put purpose before profit. And the other thing is the permission to fail. That is so critical, because we're not going to really move forward if we're always afraid. If we only do the things that are safe, we're not going to advance quick enough. And so that permission to fail and to recognize that that's an important part of learning, an important part of moving forward, is also something I think we need to embrace.
Thank you.
Echoing that just one more step, when you consider that most startups, tech startups and social good or social purpose startups would fall into the same category, something in the order of 92 or 93% fail within 3 years. So you've got to be prepared to fail, and you've got to be prepared to pivot and pick yourself up and dust yourself off and start all over again.
And I guess let me take this one step further, because I think that while certainly helping young people to find ways to pursue social purpose in a way that is profitable and sustaining is great, there are transferable skills here. Students who get into social entrepreneurship may decide to go into civil society in ways that really don't have to do with business at all, but can really make a contribution, because they've learned how to communicate, they've learned how to mobilize, they've learned how to make a difference, whether it's in a political context, in a social context, or in a business context.
That's a good point.
You're
Thank
here.
you. We're going to move on to the next question. And this is about Vancouver sometimes being referred to as the no-fun city. I've been guilty of saying that myself. or a city where people suffer social isolation. So the question is, how are you bringing civic engagement and fun, most importantly, back into the process of city building? So we'll start, Andrew, with you. And if you can, I'm going to clarify the question for you a bit. Can you talk a bit about how the role of academic institutions as community act as community anchors in this process?
Yeah, well, I've been in Vancouver for 5 years, and it seems like a fun place to me, but I think the issue of isolation, disconnection is a serious one. It's been identified as such. I think universities have a really important role to play if they choose to. If they're going to be ivory towers and cloistered, obviously they're not going to be the kind of institutions that are going to make a difference. But universities have wonderful resources, and through programs such as SFU Public Square, which we've created, I think we are providing opportunities for people to come together in safe but exciting environments, to have fun in meaningful ways, to engage on issues, to make a difference. I just came back from Tilt City, which was an opportunity for people to get out in the street, meet each other, socialize, and create art that makes a difference to the community. Universities can do that if they choose to, but it requires universities to be disruptive to themselves, to be the un-ivory tower, to be able to say, we have a different mission than a traditional university, and it's an important mission, particularly in a city that worries about the fact that it is not a fun city and where people are disconnected.
Thank you, thank you. Daryl, over to you. I'm going to change the question a little bit for you. Can you talk a bit about how planning and design can help amend this condition of social isolation, no fun, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I would say there's two aspects. There's the physical aspect and paying attention to what we're designing and designing spaces, designing buildings, really designing our region, our community to foster civic cohesion and community capacity. And we can achieve that through design. And I think urban planners are really good at understanding that. Architects and are less good at understanding that. And I think we need to bring a lot of that belief system out of urban planning into the building. And I think we can improve physically what we're building. But the other aspect is how we do things. I mentioned that we're looking at the processes of how we design. So that could be public engagement at all stages of a project, from before it's conceived to after it's finished. What role do you give people in shaping that and in providing their view of that? We need to become much better at that to really allow people, because those processes themselves connect them to those initiatives, but they also connect them to each other and to their neighbors. And so there's just so many different ways that our processes can build those bonds within a community. You give the example of today. You think you're out there activating a site, doing a temporary installation. Well, you just never know what those little connections that get made. And each one on its own is probably very small. But when you aggregate all of them together over time, you end up with a much, much greater result.
Thank you, thank you. Colleen, what is the role of the tech sector in helping people become more engaged in their communities?
Well, I can speak for what we're doing in the tech sector on that. You may remember in 2012 that the Vancouver Foundation did a study on community and urban alienation. And in that, they noted that people didn't know who lived next door, let alone down the block or in their building. And so within PlaySpeak, we've been developing a new feature that allows people to connect online with their neighbors. People that have been verified as residing within the boundaries of neighborhoods. And it's our hope with that people will be able to connect and have ongoing relationships around all different kinds of hyper-local things. In my neighborhood, it's all about off-leash dogs, but every neighborhood has those kinds of concerns. And so providing an online, a technical solution is our response to that.
And is there any privacy issues with that? I mean, if I'm living next to you and we connect, and all of a sudden now I know where you live, and like, how much information do we get about each other? Do I know where you live, like your address and stuff?
No. We adopted something that is called privacy by design principles. The former privacy commissioner in Ontario devised this system called privacy by design, which comes with 7 principles that you must adhere to in the way that you engineer or architect your site. So in the case of PlaySpeak, what we've done is we separate out your private information, including your address and phone number and email address, that are used to verify you from the feedback that you provide. And the actual presence on the map is obfuscated so that we don't, put you right where you are. So we believe that we've set a series of principles in place to protect privacy, and then we put everything in the hands of the individual on an opt-in basis, so they can decide how much or how little they interact with people in their areas.
Andrew, you had a...
Well, both of what Colleen and Daryl say are really relevant to universities and what we're doing. I mean, obviously, if we're trying to connect and trying to be engaged, doing it in a physical dimension is one modality, and an important one. And universities have tended to try to isolate themselves physically. So our Surrey campus, which is actually a fine example of Vancouverism, ironically, brings together a shopping mall, an office tower, and a university, is a wonderful example of a physical space in which engagement is almost required and is certainly encouraged. At the same time, when we're doing our public engagement, our public square, we're always thinking of social media. We're always thinking of how we're going to connect. When we measure whether we're trending nationally, and we have been in a few cases, been trending nationally on some of the events which are physical in their origin, but become much more widely distributed. And people start to interact and engage with them using technological tools and social media. So all of this, for the physical and the technological, becomes really important if, as a university, you want to think about engagement in a serious way.
How do you know if you're resulting in creating fun, though? How, are you measuring fun? Like, how do you...
Can you measure fun?
I don't know. Can you measure fun?
Some would say you shouldn't try.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe,
you just
that's the opposite of fun.
No, you just accept it, right? It's like, how do you measure beauty? And if you try to apply a strict metric system to something that is that ephemeral, you might be focusing on the wrong thing. And I think, I'm not sure I agree with either side of that, but I think they're both relevant points of view. We may not be able to measure the things that are most important, but we need to better understand them, and we need to better understand how to have more of them. And if we rely on the need to prove that we're having a specific impact, in strict, we changed 15 lives today. How do you ever do that?
Yeah. If we tried to measure it numerically, it wouldn't be fun. But if it's fun, it'll start to happen more and more. The way I measure fun is if people come to me and say, boy, we should do that again. And if I find people within the university saying, I want to do that again, that's the best evidence of fun, because it starts to create its own momentum.
Well, I think this event that's happening right downstairs that we can all hear is a great example of fun. I mean, look at us. They're obviously having a lot of fun. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm gonna. We're doing good for time, so we're slightly ahead of schedule, which is great. So I have another question, and this one's for you, Andrew. SFU prides itself on being Canada's most engaged university, and I think it's doing a good job in walking the talk. But we have a challenge in Canada where a lack of government support to universities leading to increase in corporate sponsorship. An example being the recent Enbridge deal with the University of Calgary and the recent Kinder Morgan deal with Kwantlen. So the question is, how does a university continue to support engaged, disruptive innovators who want to change the status quo while increasingly being funded by corporations with vested interests who want to maintain the status quo? How do you deal with this dissonance?
Well, I think you have to be really clear on your mission, and you have to be really clear that those who you are seeking support from are supporting you because of your mission. You're not going to alter your mission to accommodate them. And I think it's really key that you do not compromise in any way your academic programming or your goals. What we try to do is, we don't always get gifts from people that we might like to, because they're not prepared to accept the fact that the gift is not to make us do something we wouldn't otherwise do, but to enable us to do something that we think is valuable. And the gratification they get from that is because they get to bask in the shared appreciation and glory of having to help make it happen. And but I think it's really important to stay on mission and be clear about that, because, as you say, it's a reality. We are out there looking for funds, looking for support. My view is, though, that if we can show we are the best of our kind, if we can show we are Canada's most community-engaged research university, because there's a lot of engaged universities in small communities, hopefully there are enough people out there, for one reason or another, in corporations or otherwise, who will think that that's a good thing and want to be associated with it for whatever reason. And provided we stay on mission, we'll be happy to accept their support.
Good answer. Thank you. That's great because I wanted to sneak in one more question. And Daryl, this one's for you. How do we foster community in those residential towers that Vancouver has become so famous for? And what might be done through design or requirements from the city and community amenities and programming to support the creation of vertical communities?
That's a great question. It's a tricky one. You know, our
Sorry, and I just want to say, like, we all know that we don't know our neighbors in these towers. Like, it sucks for community. It's not great. So, my opinion.
Well, I think we do have the tools to try to understand and do a better job of the situation. For instance, one of the things that really works well in the city of Vancouver is that we have discretionary zoning, right, which allows negotiation. So if the city set it as a priority, they could say, you know what, we want to see a portion of that extra space that you're getting be given not to the unit themselves, but to the spaces between the units. You know, right now the market is driving it such that the units are sized, and you need as many of them as you can, and they need to be as large as they can, because that's what they're selling. And so it's the spaces in between. The spaces where community comes together, where they bump into their neighbors, are the common areas. And you know, a common room in the basement or a meeting room that nobody ever uses isn't the same as having a place where you can rest outside your door and engage with your neighbors. So I think it's a really important question, because we're going to see more and more of it, and we need to see more and more of it. So I think we need to have a really broad discussion with the city, with planning, with the development community, and say, how is it that we can create more of those spaces within the framework of these projects? Because they're going to be delivered on a market basis. So we need to find the mechanism. And I think it's there. We just have to have a will.
So the mechanism is a policy mechanism.
That's
then?
right.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Now, we're just on time for moving into our next section, where I'm going to be introducing a couple movers and shakers. Give me a second here. So we're starting off with Dinner Party YVR. I'm going to invite Crystal and Annika from Dinner Party YVR to please tell us in about a minute or two what Dinner Party YVR is, and to also ask your tough-ass question to the panel.
Oh.
Well, thank you very much for having Crystal and I here today. And we wanted to tell everybody a little bit about Dinner Party by VR. It is actually a one-of-a-kind simultaneous dinner party that happens annually in Vancouver. And the goal of the event is really to connect folks that otherwise wouldn't meet in private homes. So very much along the lines of what we were speaking about today, we were trying to build community, and we're really trying to start conversations around the dinner table. Now, the way it works is as follows. People that love to cook, just like you and I, can sign up to become a hobby chef and host a dinner on a set event night. And then diners can go to our website, dinnerpartybyvr.com, sign up for a dinner, and actually attend that dinner. People that, again, have never met will meet at these dinners. And afterwards, we actually have a big after party where we bring everybody together. And we're talking hundreds of people that come together. And actually, you can see how many people committed to dinner and had a wonderful night. Now, this all sounds fun and dandy, and we're really trying to create community. But the best part about it is we're also giving back to community.
Yeah, so the part that makes this even more special than just connecting individuals to new friends is we also bring in a charitable element where we invite each one of those hobby chefs to choose a charity that they really feel an affinity for, and we ensure that 100% of the ticket sales is donated to the charity that the hobby chefs have chosen. So to date, we've raised more than $30,000, I believe, over the last 3 events that we've produced. But even more importantly, we're seeing a lot of these great impacts that are happening. The biggest ones being awareness being built around that dinner table, and actual volunteerism that's happening, because people are actually taking the time to learn about the local charities that are in the network.
Yeah, so I guess our question to the panel...
And how do we find, what's the website?
dinnerpartybyvr.com.
Okay, that's easy. Great.
Yeah.
Great. And when's the next dinner party?
April 9th.
April 9th. Okay, great. Okay, you can ask the question.
So you were already alluding to actually a lot of the thoughts that we had and addressed a few things. For us, our dinner parties happen in a private home. Now, in a private home, the setting is fairly safe. It's very intimate. It's familiar. We're opening up. We feel that we can contribute and build relationships that maybe outside we can't build. And so you already talked a little bit about the notion of social innovation and how to combat social isolation through architecture and public spaces, etc. Now, the question is, if we can change the public space to be more inclusive, if we can change architecture to be more inviting, how can we actually encourage people to change their mindset around, oh, I'm in the public, maybe I don't feel as comfortable connecting with you as I would in a private home, in a private setting? How can those two elements of changing behaviors and how we deal with one another in the public and that, bringing that in-home setting out a little bit, how can that interact and what are your opinions about that?
Okay, Daryl, I think this is one for you. So if you can take this one.
I was looking at you.
Yeah.
Well, there is a physical component to that. I mean, certainly, as I mentioned, we can design spaces that are more encouraging of social interaction and of gathering and of bringing people together. And so, but we really can only provide the context for it and try to do a better job of providing that context. We need more of things like what you organize. I mean, it's the combination of the physical environment, but it's the social fabric as well. So it's not just an architect or a planner or a university or any of us that are going to create that social fabric. We all need to contribute to it, but we all need to do it within our own disciplines. So if I'm doing a better job from an architectural standpoint and everyone's doing within their worlds, we're going to end up with a more cohesive and a stronger social fabric, which will then take advantage of those the environments that we're creating.
Yeah, totally.
Did that work for you?
Absolutely,
yeah? Okay.
That's great.
Great.
Can I take a run too?
Go for it.
Well, because I think for public institutions like universities, at least, I think there's another change that has to take place. It's not just about engagement. It's about creating a relationship with the community which is much more co-equal, much more respectful of knowledge that comes from different non-traditional sources. Not easy for universities to do based on tradition. But at our Woodward space, for example, where we really want it to be a place where people from the downtown east side and the cultural communities feel at home, we've tried to sponsor events which really are ones where there's a combination of influences from the community, from the university, and all of them are viewed as co-equal in terms of the contribution they make. Jim Green, actually, who was a big proponent of this, opened the first lecture series on the opera for the downtown east side, and I remember him telling me a story about initially one of the security guards trying to keep people from the street from coming into this event, and Jim said, no, this is an event for the public. And when the event took place and after it was over, one of the people who did come in from the street and had a great time at this event went inside the building to go to the washroom, and a student was concerned about this and went to the security guard who Jim had talked to and said, is this okay? Someone's coming in from the street. And the security guard said, that's okay, he's from the opera. So suddenly there'd been a complete repositioning here. You know, the security guard already saw his role as inviting people in. The students saw this person from the street as a part of the community. The person from the street, perhaps a homeless person, suddenly saw this space as his space, not just a university space. So I think congratulations to you what you're doing in really private space. We've got to do the same kind of thing in space that's public, but in the past has been alienating to the general public.
Do we have any other examples of this? Colleen, do you want to jump in here at all? I mean, to answer this question?
I don't know that I can really add to that, other than what interests me is the interface between the online and offline engagement side of things, because we see so many people that are communicating through their mobile devices, and you're trying to bring it into a real life idiom. So that'll be a real challenge. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out for you.
Works really well for promotions because we do all of our promotions through social media, so that's how we get them in real life.
Yeah, starts with social media.
I can give you a cautionary tale, and it happened. It's a Woodward's example as well, because when the Tilt City event that happened today, we did it as our firm about 3 or 4 months ago. It was the kind of the precursor to this, and one of the groups, their location was outside of that building, and they went into the atrium to stage, to set up their thing, and they were there for about 30 seconds when the security guard came in and challenged them. Right. And so here's an example of a space that looks like public space, but is it truly welcoming to all? And maybe that's appropriate, maybe that's not. But certainly they were quite comfortable being challenged in that way. But others may not have. So we need to change a lot of things. Some of it is spatial, but some of it is systemic. And so we also have to be advocates for that type of systemic change that is going to say to that security guard, maybe this is okay.
Yeah, no, and today on the Tilt City event, there were some people working outside the public library who had the same kind of experience. This is a public library. You would think it would be really hospitable, and yet notions of property and of protection need to change, because even public institutions can view their property in ways that are foreclose public engagement. We've got to change that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question, so thank you very much. Next, we have Dwayne Elverum and Janet Moore, the co-founders and in many ways the yin and yang of City Studio. Please tell us within, do you have mics? Within 2 minutes, both what City Studio is and your awesome, tough-ass question.
Hi, so I'm Janet, and I'm the co-director of City Studio, and we are an innovation hub inside City Hall, where students get to work directly with city staff to co-create projects and land them on the ground. And they're not your typical projects that you might think of as a co-op or an internship. They're actually co-created experiments or prototypes. We want to see the future that they imagine on the ground. And we think we're changing systems, and we're also changing culture. So we're changing the culture of the classroom because we're outside of the university, we're inside City Hall. We get to a new space to imagine what the future of the classroom might look like. And we're also shifting culture at City Hall for a place that doesn't usually take risks and innovate and be creative. We allow the city to take those risks, and so we operate outside of City Hall.
I'm going to give you a little bit more time to just give us a quick example.
Okay,
one of your projects.
I'm going to say that we do two things.
Okay.
So we offer courses. We have a course in the studio. We also offer a campus network of courses where faculty can matchmake with city staff, and we share the model. Other cities are super interested in building city studios, so we're also sharing that. Examples of projects that have come out of City Studio is one student who said, I'd love to just put a piano in this park. And we said, oh, wow, we're going to do this. And how do you get a permit for a piano? And that was the start of the Keys to the Streets program, where now you see 10 pianos every year in public space.
Excellent. Yeah. And how do we find out about City Studio? Do you have a website or something?
CityStudioVancouver.com.
Great, thank you. Dwayne?
And so I'm going to say a little bit about the why. There's 100,000 undergraduates in the city of Vancouver, and these undergraduates are looking for a generational mission, something like we probably haven't seen since Haight-Ashbury. And we feel the power of this generational ask, and they're looking for a place to go. And I think what's happening here is an example of them finding a place where they can do the thing they need to do. They don't know what the name is yet. And so we are in a building under a bridge on the water, on unceded Coast Salish territory, in a city that's in a country where the Ministry of the Environment was just changed to the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. We watched it live on the internet today. So I don't know what
You're clapping to that as well.
I don't know what your experience was, but I was crying. I couldn't believe that something's happening now, and we know that we're in a moment in the country and in the world where we're being asked to do something that I feel I've never been asked to do in my entire life before, and that's respond to this mission. So our question for the panel and for all of us is, we think we're disruptive. Mm-hmm. We rely on institutions to do this work, but we need to be allowed to disrupt in ways that you can't even imagine yet. And we're being pushed from behind. I think the students are living in the future, and we have to meet them there. They will inherit this country in a way that we can't imagine. So you all have job descriptions, and we know that you're awesome at your jobs. But this question has two parts. Number one, what does the world need that's not in your job description that you know you need to do? And how is it related to how disruptive are we allowed to be?
Okay, who wants to take that?
Well, I'll go. Well, I believe that information communications technology has the disruptive potential to transform our democracy. I believe that by authenticating your digital identity in such a way that you can provide feedback to government and for decision making and policies in a tangible, quantifiable, evidence-based way can have huge transformative power in our democracy. Right now, we don't have that. You know, we've just come through a federal election where we've seen above average turnout, and we're all excited about the potential and where we're going forward from 2015, yay. But imagine if at a grassroots level that everybody had the potential to be contributing feedback in a tangible and defensible way, how that legitimation could really transform our process. So that's what I'm interested in from a disruptive perspective, is the power, again, of ICTs in transforming democracy.
ICTs?
Information communications technology.
Well, I'm going to answer it in a slight, I hope this is responsive, but what I thought about when you asked the question was, in the case of universities, I think the way real disruption takes place is not by the university itself being out there in the front line and taking positions, which in fact can compromise the university's capacity, but is giving license and power and opportunity to its students and its faculty and staff to go out there and make that difference, as City Studio has done, and creating the opportunities for courses like Semester in Dialogue, which is associated with City Studio, because I think the university really is a platform. And what we have to do within the university, therefore, is transform the culture of the university to encourage students and encourage faculty to feel safe and protected by the university in doing things that are disruptive, hopefully in a positive way, and differentiate that from the university itself as an institution being the agent of change. It's the vehicle for the change, but the agency will be done by the students, by the faculty, being encouraged and supported by the university.
Well, I guess I'll give the example of my firm, because I mean the question goes really directly to what we're up to. We've embraced the need to change the way architecture is practiced. We look backwards and say that the way architecture has been practiced for the last millennia is not what society needs from us moving forward. So we're trying to answer that question for ourselves as to what is it that society needs from us, because we firmly believe that our value to society comes from our decision making and our ability to help communities and help disparate groups solve complex problems. So what we're trying to do is expand the types of problems and conversations that we get involved with. So an example, we've recently hired an individual that ran this event today from a completely different design discipline. And I refer to him as our constructive disruptor. And for me, disruption is only helpful when it's constructive disruption. If we disrupt for disruption's sake, we're not going to have much impact. But if we disrupt in a constructive way and always stay within a reasonable boundary we can pull people a lot further along. So we're doing that with our firm, and we're looking for new questions and new challenges to apply our skill set. And that'll still be traditional architecture, but it's going to be a lot more, because we think that our thought process and our way of solving and helping communities can be applied to bigger and more diverse questions.
Thank you. So how was that for you? I have a feeling they didn't quite go deep enough. I'm not sure. Yeah? No? Do you want to ask a more probing question or a clarifying question?
I think we do have to talk about what's in the room. So we rely heavily on institutions to do our work and the generosity of institutions. And we've been given the keys to the castle inside City Hall, and they've given us a freedom to act as a skunkworks inside City Hall. But I feel like it's not enough. There's something about institutions, and especially powerful institutions like universities and other organizations, saying we need to give you more room to do your work, because we know the voices are there, and I think anyone who works in large, we know there's something moving up through us. And I guess it has to do with that question of how do we negotiate a little more room to do our work? And it's across the city. It's not just because we're affiliated with the university or the...
Well, I can give you a related example that's of a similar challenge, and I think we can learn from that experience. If you go back 5 or 6 years in the city of Vancouver, the plumbing department, we were trying, and you would know this as well as I, trying to implement more sustainable solutions, whether it be to groundwater or plumbing issues. And the institutional resistance to what the green building movement was trying to do was really overwhelming. Now, that's changed to a certain degree, not enough, but there's no question that the institution tends to always be behind that initiative. And in some ways, it's about that constructive aspect that we can push, but if we push too hard, we're actually not going to get that change. So we have to find that right balance of pushing in a way that is actually going to institute change within an organization. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it needs to be steady. And I think once you get small wins, you get more wins, and it becomes a catalyst, and you get bigger wins.
And I want to go back to Colleen's point about changing democracy. I mean, I know sometimes the constraints feel like they're simply lack of resources or lack of institutional support, but I think really what we need to do is we need to reorient the way we think about democracy and community building and building, the strength of civil society through democratic engagement and participation. We need community support. The reality is, without community support and without the community being mobilized more broadly, the constraints will always be there because institutions are subject to those constraints. The city is subject to those constraints. So we have to be sure that when we're pursuing social innovation, that we're not doing it instead of politics. We're not doing it instead of mobilization. We're not doing it instead of the state. We have to do both. We have to make sure that the democratic institutions are there, that the community is supportive, and then the license will be there and the institutions will be able to move in the direction you want us to.
Okay, I think that's good. That's enough time for this question. Thank you. So I'm happy to say we actually have a little bit of time for a question, probably at least maybe just one question from the audience. So who in the audience has a question? Dave, go for it. And keep it succinct.
I will, and hopefully you can hear me. I'm a tech entrepreneur in Vancouver. There's a lot of really great aspects here and components of the culture here that make it a nurturing environment, but there's three that make it almost impossible. And I think that I would love to hear a reaction to these three. Number one, in order to take risk where 92% of new businesses fail, you need an affordable environment. It is the least affordable place in Canada. And so who is actually going to take an economic risk here? Who can afford to put their life on the line and actually take a risk? The only reason there's creativity in East Vancouver is because there's cheap places to live. There's very, very few cheap places, and so it's very, very difficult for anybody to take an economic risk. Number two, there's very, very little investment possibilities here. The amount of investment compared to somewhere like Silicon Valley is a paltry sum. And so finding investors in new ideas is very difficult. And number three, we don't like things that are created here. We've got this whole, if it's made elsewhere, it must be good. If it's made here, something must be wrong with it. And so anything that's local, it's the Bryan Adams effect all over again. And so those three challenges, I think each of you have kind of touched on that, but I just wanted to put it out there like right, hitting a nail on the head. How do we actually create a nurturing environment when we got these really opposing forces that are pushing innovation down? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Well, hear, Dave. Couldn't agree more. That's why startups start out of people's basements and garages, because you can't afford to be going into other places. But there seems to me there is a fair amount of support on the supply side. With a startup, there's lots of incubators and spaces out there that people can get into. We also have the support of a variety of different institutional funding. We've benefited from the National Research Council IRAP program. We've done a total of 7 MyTax internships, which are co-funded graduate student internships. And if you're doing R&D kind of work, there's support on the supply side, but the last part of this is the demand side, getting people to pay for it. You're right, you're never a prophet in your own village. I don't know that it's uniquely Canadian or uniquely Vancouver, but you know as well as I do that if we're successful away, if we make it in New York or Los Angeles or Timbuktu even, then they'll pay attention to us here. I don't know why that is, but it seems to me you got good supply support, crappy demand support. And that would be my comment.
Andrew,
Well,
do you wanna, yeah?
I certainly relate to the frustration and the constraints. Cost, I mean, in terms of trying to get faculty to come here, trying to get students to come here, trying to open up new facilities, it's a very, very challenging environment. I guess all I can say there is that, as Colleen said, we're trying our best to push back. We have been able to get some funding from the federal government, and we're about to open 24,000 square feet of incubator space right in Harbor Center, which will provide some soft landing and some maker space and the like for startups. On the venture capital side, I guess I'm a little hopeful that the Liberal Party ran on a platform which is very much focused on supporting innovation. The provincial government is developing a technology strategy. And while I know we're talking about private sources to a large extent, I think the public sector can do a lot to leverage venture capital, and we can all try to work harder to try to get angel investors and the likes to the table, but I know it isn't easy. The third one's the one that I just don't relate to as a consumer. I'm sure it's true for what you say in terms of your sector and your experience, but I would call it the Sarah McLachlan effect with me. I love things that are local. If I can find a deli that isn't part of a chain, or a coffee shop that isn't branded, across the country or around the world, I will gravitate towards it. And I think there's a lot of other people who feel that same way. So maybe we just need to work a little harder. Maybe that should be the next SFU Public Square, on love ourselves a little bit more as we connect together and engage.
And what about, Andrew?
I've been here for 5 years.
yeah, give it a little more time. Andrew, what about on affordability, though? Dave brought up this issue that Vancouver's so expensive to live. SFU, I understand, is you have housing on campus.
We're trying. I mean, we're building a residence for international students downtown. It's still expensive, but we're doing it to have a lower price point for international students than they could get in the market. We've developed a whole community on Burnaby Mountain, University. It's still, nothing is inexpensive in this area. But for example, we did develop a rather creative way of allowing faculty and staff to buy in below market. When they sell below market. They don't capture that windfall. And I've got a whole other set of frustrations I won't share with you, where we're not allowed to borrow in order to do a whole bunch of great stuff to develop lower cost alternatives for housing. We'd love to do a lot more, is the truth. We'd love to be we'd love to be a university that can express our social entrepreneurship in a much greater way, and we could, but for the fact that any debt, for example, we incur has to be approved by the province because we're seen as a government entity, and they won't let us incur debt even if it's self-supported. So that's a frustration that I'll add to your list.
Okay, Daryl, you've got the last word.
Well, I have a slightly different view on the issue of affordability in Vancouver. On one hand, I know the challenge of finding creative space in the city. We recently moved offices. It took us literally 10 years to find a space that we could afford that would suit a design studio type space for a growing firm. So it's a major problem across a wide range of industries. It's a function of our history, it's a function of the economics. But what we need to do is stop complaining about it, frankly. It's not going away. The things that are driving affordability in Vancouver are global issues that are beyond our control. To a large degree. There are things that are within our control, and right now we're not willing to have the conversation about the things that we can control, and that comes down to our expectations. If you go to a city like London or to New York, lots of creative things happening there. The cost of real estate isn't very economical there either. You don't see a lot of single-family homes in those contexts.
San Francisco
or San Francisco, exactly. So we have to start asking ourselves, what do we actually need, and what can we sustain as we move forward? And we're not actually we're looking for people to blame right now. We're looking for scapegoats, and it's actually not helping find the solution.
Well, I think we're going to have to conclude at that. So thank you.
I just want to say, I don't think David's looking for a scapegoat, but it's important to understand the constraints, but not be paralyzed by them.
Okay, great.
I wanted to stir it up.
Yes, thank you. That's why you're here, Dave.
We talked for an hour about affordability, right?
Yeah.
On that one.
It's a whole
Okay,
nother
so
session.
to wrap up, we've learned a lot about social innovation. It is defined, it's a bit of a nebulous concept. It's defined a bit differently depending on who you ask. And it's been great to hear from these experts on how they define it and how you apply it and how you nurture it within your own organizations, from the design to the academic to the technology sectors. And we've learned a lot about how social innovation can play a key role in the process of city building. So I want to thank everyone for attending this event. That concludes this afternoon's event. And I believe, will you guys be available afterwards for some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
For a very few minutes, because I'm off
minutes.
to another SFU engagement event, We the City. I hope everyone comes.
Okay, great. Okay, so a round of applause to the panel. And over to you, Petra.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a quick note, there are some tickets available for the We the City discussion tonight with Candy Chang and Teju.
Buffy St. Marie, 2015 Polis Award winner. She's back. And Teja Cole.
And I'm told that Professor Petter here will be doing a beat poem, so you're not going to want to miss
Of my
that.
own authorship.
Yeah, so find one of
wanna
the
miss
great people from SFU if you want to join for that. And this session will also be available online starting tomorrow morning as part of the Disruptive Innovation Festival platform at thinkdiff.co. So feel free to share it more widely in your networks. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thank you.